Every car has a beginning and an end. It rolls off the production line looking shiny and new, and it usually ends with being crushed or scrapped. That isn't the story of every car, though. Sometimes they're just dumped by their owners in a strange circumstance and left to rot, even if they're incredibly rare or valuable. That's the tale of all of the cars you're about to see in this video. They're priceless vehicles that deserved a better fate than the one they got. Nothing screams classy like a Jaguar XK120. They're status symbols as well as cars, and owning one lets your friends know that you're someone with expensive tastes. Even in a near derelict condition, they're still valuable, which means that you'd still have to part with a significant sum to own this rusty, clapped-out model from 1954, which appeared on eBay in March 2020. It's just about believable that it might one day run again, but it's going to need some work. The body's still in one piece, but rust is eating right through it. The windshield frame has been removed, the convertible top is long gone, and there's evidence that amateur patch and fill work has been performed on the body. Still, at least the original wheels are still attached. The engine's been modified or replaced at some point in the past too. The numbers on the head match the chassis, but the numbers on the block don't. Even with the interior almost completely rotted away, the seller, who claimed the car has been in his barn for decades, was hoping to receive $25,000 for it. We have no idea who dragged a pre-war Maybach out to a forest near Kiev or left it standing there for years, but we hope they had a good reason. It might not be looking its best, given the fact that it no longer has any wheels, but this is a Maybach Zeppelin DS8 1932. A car that was a rarity even in the 1930s and is even rarer today. Getting this car back to its original state would require more than just new wheels. It would also involve sourcing some original parts. The radiator isn't an original fixture, and the brakes appear to have been fitted at some point during the 1980s. The saving grace might be the fact that the original engine is still present, and it's a huge 8-liter V12 with 200 horsepower. Capable of speeds up to 105 miles per hour. Based on the state of the chassis, that brake replacement in the 1980s might be the last bit of maintenance this proud old car ever received. It's not quite beyond salvation yet, but it isn't far away. Even people who know nothing about old cars know that classic Ford models are valuable, so they'd probably recognize the value of this 1930 Model A on sight. Given the fact that it's now in its 90th year, it's in remarkably good condition. So it promised to be a fine investment for somebody when it was offered for sale on the internet in April 2020. This was the highly popular follow-up to Henry Ford's Model T, and with almost 5 million of them sold, it isn't exceptionally rare, but it's still unusual to find one that's still in running condition as this one is. The owner, who's based in Florida in the USA, wanted only $6,000 for it when he listed it for sale. We think he may have been selling himself short. The condition of the underside of the vehicle shows that it would probably still need some attention from a mechanic before it could be driven safely, but aside from that, it's showing very few signs of its age. Perhaps that's because it spent at least part of the past 30 years inside what its owner describes as a man cave. Our next abandoned luxury vehicle has an unusual backstory. It's been abandoned not because its owners forgot about it, but because they wanted to punish it for embarrassing them. It's a Daimler DS 420, procured at great expense by the local authorities of Bucharest in Romania ahead of a state visit by Prince Philip of England in 2001. The car was supposed to be his personal escort for the duration of his stay and was parked below the Bucharest International Hotel, waiting to greet him. When the time came for the prince to head out on his royal duties, the car failed to start. A mechanic was called, but the engine couldn't be persuaded to turn over, so alternative arrangements had to be made for the hotel's royal guest at the last minute. The mechanic was sent away, and the car has been standing in the hotel's underground car park ever since. It was offered to the British consulate a few years ago, but they refused to take it. Given that it has a value of over $70,000, it's surprising that they haven't attempted to sell it. There are many competing theories about which model or brand of car should be considered America's most treasured classic. But the Pontiac has to be in the conversation. People who own classic Pontiacs are usually very proud of them and want to show them off to their friends and family, especially if the car in question is a beautiful 1965 Pontiac Luxury GTO. Unfortunately, this particular model hasn't moved anywhere for more than 15 years. It was bought as a restoration project by its owner in 2005, but they never got around to starting the project, let alone completing it. When it was bought brand new in 1965, its first owner opted to have some additional features installed, including powered windows, air conditioning, and power steering. At the time, such features were the exception rather than the rule. It could use a little cosmetic work, but the engine still runs, and the $23,000 asking price seems more than reasonable. Anyone willing to pay cash up front would also get some chrome exhaust tips and an AM/FM radio as part of the deal, although why they're not already attached to the car is anybody's guess. Professional athletes and sports people are attracted to expensive luxury cars, so we aren't surprised to find out that Virat Kohli, a star of the Indian cricket team, bought a brand new Audi R8 V10 in 2012. We were, however, surprised to find out that he's allowed it to rot. That's an especially poor decision considering the fact that he's supposed to be Audi's brand ambassador in his home country. In fairness, Virat is only partially to blame for the state of his car. His contract with Audi states that he shouldn't sell their vehicles without their permission, but he did so anyway in 2017 to a businessman called Sagar Thakkar. Not long later, Thakkar was implicated in an enormous financial fraud case, and as he went on the run from police, his personal possessions were seized and impounded. That included the Audi. In other countries, a car seized by the police would eventually be sold at auction if the owner is unwilling or unable to pay for its release, but that doesn't appear to be the case in India. The Audi has been standing in an open parking lot for 3 years, and 3 years of exposure to the elements are beginning to take a toll on its once pristine bodywork. Not all stories of abandonment end with a car that can no longer be used. Some of them end in salvation, like the salvation of this beautiful Porsche 911T. The original owner of the car was a young British man named Graham, who was given $15,000 by his parents to use as a deposit on his first home. Instead of doing that, he used the money to import the 1967 Porsche from the Netherlands. His parents weren't happy, but it became his pride and joy. Having bought the car in 2001, he drove it proudly for 4 years until he took a job opportunity in the United Arab Emirates. Believing he'd be gone for no longer than 6 months, he left the car behind. He ended up staying in the UAE for more than a decade, and without him to care for it, the car fell into disrepair. It wasn't until 2015 that Graham finally returned to the UK, and on his return, he found that the tires were deflated, the purple body was both dusty and rusty, and the engine wouldn't start up. Fortunately, a specialist firm called Tower Porsche was able to revive his prized possession for him, and now it's back out on the roads of England. We don't know if abandoning Porsches is becoming a trend, but here's another forgotten model that's been left in a car park. Worryingly, as well as being covered in the dust that comes with years of abandonment, it's also covered in soot. There's no sign of fire damage to the body of this car, but it's clearly been near something that was burning. These pictures were taken in February 2020, but it's said that the Porsche has been standing immobilized in a Singapore car park for at least 5 years. Nobody seems to know the full backstory, but the most commonly told version of events is that the owner is in dispute with a workshop that was supposed to perform maintenance on the vehicle for him. He wasn't happy with the standard of their work and refused to pay them, so they retaliated by clamping the car, and that's how things have stayed ever since. Another rumor that we've seen circulating online is that the soot came from a small engine fire, although that story is unsubstantiated. There's a Facebook group intent on buying this car and getting it up and running again, but so far they've made no progress. We've already seen one impounded luxury car in India when we looked at Virat Kohli's Audi earlier on. Now here's a whole fleet of them being held by the country's Directorate of Revenue Intelligence. Many of the cars are rare, valuable, or both. But the pride and joy of the fleet is probably a Lexus that was owned by Salman Khan until the directorate took ownership of it. All of the cars have been seized under suspicion that they were bought using money that came from the proceeds of crime or other economic offenses. And on average, they've been in the car park for 3 years. With so many expensive cars clustered together, the pound has become a somewhat unlikely tourist attraction. There are more than 20 cars in there at the moment, joined by a select few superbikes. Sachin Tendulkar's Aston Martin is one of the more popular attractions for visitors, as is Abhishek Bachchan's Bentley. The cars cannot be released while criminal cases are ongoing, so they may all remain where they are for quite some time. Most people have a stereotypical image of a Ferrari in their mind, and that image involves something long, red, and streamlined or curvaceous. The slightly box-shaped blue car probably doesn't fit the bill, but that doesn't change the fact that it's a Ferrari. To be more specific, it's a 250 Ferrari GTE, and even if the average person can't see the value in it, a Ferrari enthusiast would. The car was bought brand new in 1961, but it spent at least the past 30 years in a barn in California before being pulled out and offered for sale in April 2020. Despite the dust, the car is in great condition. The V12 engine is an original, the triple carburetor setup hasn't been tampered with, and the interior is in much better condition than the exterior, thanks to being kept inside a barn in the warm California climate. The underside of the vehicle has managed to stay free of rust. There are approximately 300 Series 1 GTEs like this still left in the world, and their value varies depending on their condition. For this particular model, the owner is only entertaining offers in excess of $250,000. Despite what your eyes might be telling you, this next car isn't a Maserati. If your next guess would be to say it's a Lamborghini, you're out of luck on that front as well. We don't blame you if you can't identify it though. It's a 1967 Iso Grifo, and only 413 of them were ever built. Of those, only 34 of them were fitted out for driving on the right-hand side of the road. We don't know how many of those 34 still exist, but this is one of them. And for a car that's been inside a barn for 3 decades, it's looking pretty good. According to the owner, who offered it for sale at a bargain $50,000 in 2016, it's been off the road since 1986, but had no mechanical issues. Adding to its appeal, it's understood that the original 327 Chevy V8 engine is still there under the hood. These cars are so rare that they almost never turn up for sale anywhere in the world, so this must have been considered a real collector's item when it emerged 4 years ago. We hope whoever owns it now is driving it proudly. The 1977 Lotus Esprit is considered quite an exotic car, but not when it's looking like this. A car like this is best seen driving out on a highway at high speed as the sun is coming down, not covered in dust and detritus in a forgotten barn. We don't know how or why the car came to be in such a sorry state, but there are more issues with it than just the damage to the bodywork. Perhaps that's why its Los Angeles-based owner only wanted $4,500 for it when he tried to sell it on Craigslist in early 2015. This S1 version of the car is especially rare. Lotus only built it between 1975 and 1978, and they completed only 894 units of the vehicle in total. Believe it or not, this is the exact same make and model of the car that became a global icon when it appeared in the 1970s James Bond movies. Bond wouldn't be caught dead driving it in such a shabby state though. We can only hope that the damage isn't so bad that it can't be salvaged at all. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications, and you will be the first to know when a new video comes out. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next video.